Hello, welcome to Books and Brews,
the place where beer and literature meet.
With your host, certified cicerone Michael Agnew.
And Laura Mosica, author of the Bluebells Chronicles.
Each month we invite a guest author to read their words and talk about writing while sipping beers specially paired with their work.
Today we welcome John Gaspard and Jim Cunningham.
So sit back,
pop a cold one,
and dive into some books
and brews. Okay, go.
Yep. So, here we are. What episode are we on, Michael?
We are on episode 14.
14. You guys missed Lucky 13 by one. So, we are here today, a year and 2 months into our podcast.
That's the podcast part, not the full length of the history right. of. This is like year what, 4?
Officially number 24, and I believe we're giving it COVID numbers too. Is this COVID 3?
COVID 3.
Okay, we're hoping we don't get up to COVID-19. How's your month been, apart from, the world being in chaos?
Just kind of sheltering in place, That's about it.
How about your garden?
Garden's beautiful. Everything's coming out. Planted all my herbs. Was on a hard search for shishito peppers. Finally found those yesterday.
Shishito peppers, is that because you look for mushrooms?
That was to plant shishito peppers. My girlfriend's Japanese, so we like to have shishito peppers that we can grow and grill. I have been looking for mushrooms, though. This hasn't been a particularly good foraging year so far.
Why is that?
I don't know. Other people I know are finding all kinds of great things. I'm not finding any great things.
Okay. So, knowing anything about weather or seasons for mushrooms, I was curious if it was something like that.
It started out really dry, so it's only recently, since we've gotten rain, that things have started popping. But again, I'm not finding them.
Plenty of rain. The rain has interfered with my biking. I was getting close to 20 miles a day, 3 times a week, and then the rain hit. Now I'm fat again. We got our garden started in boxes in the front window, and I've been trying to get my son to go out there and actually put it in the ground. And
as I recall, that was a problem last year. I don't think you ever put the plants in the ground.
We looked at the garden a lot, and I talked about it a lot. I thought that was pretty good for someone who's never really gardened before the previous year. But yeah, my month's kind of been the same. Just, I'm teaching lessons by Skype, a few of them, and I did my presentation, Scotland in the Eyes of the Author, on Zoom. So that was different. I set up a big, in fact, John, you know Bob Miller. He lent me his big magician's backdrop.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it worked really well. It was a crowded space, because I'm used to a big open area where I can spread out the weapons and the helmet and the instruments. I've got like half a dozen medieval and modern instruments that I bring. So it was really, really tight space. But it worked pretty well once I got into the swing of it. So we have something different today. We have 2 guests. Once again, we have a magician with us. If everybody remembers Bob Miller coming, maybe close to a year ago now. So actually, I'm sorry, I need to correct myself. John, you are not exactly a magician. Hardly. You're more of a magician than I am.
Yes, my goal to be more of a magician than the average person.
That's like me. I'm more of a musician than the average person. But John does write about magic. So let me read his bio. And then our other guest, John Gaspard. Am I pronouncing it correctly?
You are.
Well, very good. Let me see if I can do it twice. John Gaspard is author of the Eli Marks mystery series, as well as 2 standalone novels, The Greyhound of the Baskervilles and The Ripperologist, and the Como Lake Players mystery series under the pen name Bobby Raymond. John is not a magician, but he has directed 6 low-budget features that cost very little and made even less. And that's no small trick. He's also written multiple books on the subject of low-budget filmmaking. Ironically, they've made more than the films. That is ironic. John lives in Minnesota with his lovely wife, several dogs, a few cats, and a handful of pet allergies. So, John, you would be right at home in my house.
Yeah. It's similar pollen here today. My wife is off in another room, but it's been a bad pollen week.
Yeah, you know what? It's been bad pollen here for me. I started in January, and it's not letting up. So, our other guest, actually, probably millions of people in Minnesota who have ever been here probably already know him, although they don't know it. Jim Cunningham is an actor, writer, producer, and director. He spent 3 years in Dudley Riggs' Brave New Workshop's resident improv comedy, and has done numerous television commercials, including the Carsoup Guy and voiceovers for TV and animated series. He hosted Mall of America, The Show, Explore Minnesota, Golf Nut for WCCO TV, Minnesota Fun for the Twins and Minnesota Wild, and has been the host of the Renaissance Festival's Feast of Fantasy for 27 years. Last but not least, Jim spent 3 years hosting his own radio show on sports and entertainment. So, welcome, Jim. One of the times I was at Feast of Fantasy, you had some guy sit in my fiance's lap, so... The next year we went there, we noticed that that same joke and the guy sitting in some guy's lap was in the exact same chair. So
it tends to be where we want it to be on any given show. I'm going to say every show somebody gets their lap used.
I'm sure. I'm sure. Well, he was in the lucky seat that year, so now I'm putting a name to that face. So welcome. It's nice to meet you.
Welcome, both of you.
Michael, what beer do we have?
All right. So first beer for the day is Schell's Hefeweizen from Schell's down in New Ulm. It is a classic German wheat beer. Lovely, great example of that style. I chose that to go with this ambitious card reading because as I was reading that or listening to that, it was all about illusion and misdirection and things that appear to be something but aren't, which was a common theme in a couple of these readings and a couple of these pairings. So I was looking for a beer that gives you an illusion of something, and German Hefeweizen, German wheat beers are a great example of that because they give you the illusion that there's bananas in there or cloves in there, and that is a product of the fermentation, the yeasts that they use to ferment these beers. So there isn't actually banana or clove or banana runts or circus peanuts or any of the other descriptions that have been used to describe these beers. Circus peanuts, not peanut, but the candy circus peanuts. Those disgusting candy peanuts. There's a vague taste like that in some of these beers.
But now it's actual circus peanuts in a beer now that you mentioned it.
Yes. But there's none of those things in this beer. It just gives you the illusion that there are those things in this beer. So, cheers.
Cheers.
I think I'm the only one that has beer right now. That's the downside of doing this via Skype is... All right, good.
I tried. I'm just telling you, I was at a liquor store at 8:30 a.m. I'm ashamed to say, but it's true. And they told me none of these beers exist. So
yeah, they didn't know what they were talking about because all of these beers, well, the exception of the second one, which is only available in a seasonal 12-pack, but the others are not hard to find at all.
Well, it's funny. I have a similar conversation each time. Usually I can find one or two, but whichever one I can't find, they tell me that is not in season. It's not on any shelf anywhere. And I said, Michael found it 2 days
sure
ago.
is.
And they go, it doesn't exist. It's nowhere. And I'm not going to argue.
All right, so let's hear this reading.
Well, but Michael, how did I like the beer?
Oh, you might like this beer. It's not going to be your favorite because it's not malty. It's very yeasty, but it does have like nice banana, fruity, clovey flavors to it. It's very light, so you might like it somewhat.
I might be inspired to try it sometime. I like bananas. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, on with the reading. Eli Mark's mystery, The Ambitious Card.
We've still a couple minutes of the show left, the host said. Is there anything else you can show us tonight? How about a quick card trick with just Gray here? The audience showed their enthusiasm for the idea by bursting into applause again. That sounds like fun, the host said over the ovation, and then he turned to Gray. Are you up for it? He asked, pretending that Gray had a choice in the matter. Sure thing, he said, with all the sincerity of a used car salesman. After seeing him perform tonight, I sense that Gray is an ambitious guy. So this will be the perfect card trick for him. It's called the Ambitious Card. I fanned the cards and held them out to Gray. Pick a card, I said. Practically dripping with contempt, Gray reached out and pulled a card out of the cluster without even bothering to look at it. I gathered the cards together and pivoted in my chair, turning my back on him. Now, go ahead and sign your name on the face of the card just to ensure that I don't try to switch cards later on. I could hear him sigh deeply, and then I heard the rustle of clothing as he pulled a pen out of his suit coat pocket. Moments later, I heard the scratching of the pen on the card, then the click of the pen and the sound of rustling again. All set? I asked, with a bit too much cheer. Yes, all set, he replied, with virtually no inflection in his voice. I turned back to the table and once again held the cards out to him, slowly riffling through them. Say stop wherever you like, I instructed. Stop, he growled. I stopped riffling and told him to place the card at that spot in the deck, which he did with little enthusiasm. I cut the cards and then gave the deck 2 quick shuffles. So, I mixed the cards twice and cut them once. Your card is buried somewhere in the deck, but like I said, it's an ambitious card. So, with a little coaxing from me, I said as I gave the bottom of the deck a hard flick of my index finger, your card magically moves to the top of the deck. With that, I peeled back the top card, revealing a signed card, the King of Diamonds. Gray stared at me with disdain, but the crowd applauded wildly. With that, I launched into the trick with fervor. I shuffled the deck. The King of Diamonds returned to the top. The host shuffled the deck. The King of Diamonds returned to the top. There may be only one solution, I continued, putting the card back with the others and shuffling them vigorously. We may have to take lethal steps. I shuffled the card one last time and then spread all the cards face down across the table in front of me. Gray, could I bother you to lend me your blindfold and your letter opener, that wickedly sharp one you used earlier? Slowly, he reached into his coat and withdrew the long strip of black fabric and the letter opener, setting both on the table just outside of my reach. Before I could lean forward to take the objects, Nova moved in and picked up both of them. She moved into assistant mode, stepping behind me and placing the letter opener on the table near my right hand. And then she took the blindfold and covered my eyes, skillfully tying a snug knot against the back of my head. I moved my right hand until I could feel the sharp point of the letter opener, carefully sliding my hand down the blade until I was able to grasp the handle. I gave a few of the cards one final push with my left hand as I raised the blade in my right. Let's just see if we can trap that ambitious card, I said, and then with a sudden movement, buried the tip of the blade into the tabletop. There was a surprised gasp from the crowd, which grew in volume and intensity as I pulled off the blindfold with my left hand, keeping my right firmly on the handle of the letter opener. I rocked the blade back and forth, carefully removing it from where it had jabbed the table. Several cards fell away as I lifted the letter opener, revealing that only one card had been actually stabbed. I tilted the letter opener forward, holding the face of the card up to the crowd and, I'll admit, to the television camera. It was the King of Diamonds, with the point of the blade cutting evenly through his one eye. I removed the card from the tip of the blade and, reaching across the table, I slid it into the front breast pocket of Gray's suit, giving it a final pat as I did. He was staring at me from across the table, seething with fury, anger, and even more hatred than before. To be fair, though, I don't think it would have improved his mood any if he had known that in less than 4 hours he would no longer be angry. He would instead be dead.
John, were you writing before you met Jim?
Yes, I was. I've written screenplays for years, ever since I was a teenager. I've written a bunch of screenplays, and from a few of those I've made feature films. Plus, in the corporate world, I made my living as a video script writer. So I had a lot of experience, but nothing as long and complicated as a novel.
So you find writing a novel more complicated than a screenplay?
Yes, being that I'm in the midst right now of adapting a screenplay into a novel, screenplays are just a whole lot less words. It's a whole lot less words.
Why is it easier? I mean, less words, but is it because you don't have to write the descriptions? I would think the whole aspect of plotting, character development, all of that would be similar.
It is to a degree. Plotting certainly is, but there's so much that can be conveyed in a screenplay by just a look from an actor that you can reference. You can create a lot of that backstory about a character just in a few strokes. Whereas in a novel, you kind of have to dig in and tell the reader more. They don't have that visual to guide them.
See, and I think that's fascinating because to me, I've tried occasionally to write scripts, and I find it much easier to write a novel. Maybe that's because that's what I do. You know, maybe if I'd started off with scripts, I would find it easier.
It's funny, though. I mean, my entire background is theater. I own a theater company. I write all of our materials. I can't write a script to save my life. I have to come up with scenarios and have actors improvise around them in order to get to be able to actually come up with a workable script.
Well, explain that, Michael, though. You just said you write all the material, but you don't write a script.
Yeah, I do it via actors. I have them improvise around scenarios.
Okay.
Use them to create the dialogue.
Okay. And that's fascinating because that's yet another aspect of writing.
Well, that's Jim's early background is in improv at Dudley Brave New Workshop, in which I believe all the sketches were. I know you came in writing some stuff, but a lot of it came from suggestions of the audience that you later built on. Isn't that right?
That is, yeah. We used to come up with a theme for whatever the show was going to be, and then we started a series of improvs in rehearsal, and that's where the scripts were written from. But then after every performance, we would do some instant theater and allow the audience to toss out some suggestions, and we would turn them into kind of live, spontaneous kumbaya pieces of theater right there in front of everybody.
I have a question. The allergies in the early morning kicking in. I have a question from a listener. Actually, this is from Bob Miller. He had some things he specifically wanted to know about your writing because, of course, he's a magician. And his question was, all your books are named after magic tricks, so do you have a criterion for choosing which trick would make a good theme for a story?
Yes, I don't have a strong criterion. It has to be an interesting name. And the ambitious card, which was the first one, was absolutely that. It has to be something that I can actually describe without giving it away, such as the second book in the series is called The Bullet Catch. The third book is called The Miser's Dream. These are all tricks that are very visual. They're easy to describe. And it's nice. It's a nice to have to tie it in thematically with the story. But that doesn't always happen. But yeah, it's generally, what's a cool name for a title based on a trick. One of the ones I wanted to use early on was called The Trick That Cannot Be Explained, which is a very cool card trick. But the publisher had at the time said, no, you can't do that. That's way too long of a title. I can't tweet that. It has to be shorter. So we've kind of come up with the format that all the books are titled The Something Something, The Miser's Dream, The Floating Light Bulb, The Zombie Ball, to kind of keep them all in that same category.
So were you able to take that name, The Trick That Cannot Be Explained? What did the title become?
That one became The Miser's Dream.
Oh, okay. I think that we are ready for beer number 2, Michael.
All right, beer number 2. for the reading Theater Can Be Murdered. The image that stood out in this for me was the set, because the one of the main character kind of is examining this set the whole time. And coming from theater and having built a number of sets myself, there is a saying among people who build sets that goes, "It doesn't have to be good, it just has to look good."
Right.
So it's like a facade, it's a fake. You walk through the door, you don't walk into another room, you walk into backstage. So I was looking for a beer that kind of was a fake, a facade of something. So I looked at Session IPA. The idea of a Session IPA is an India Pale Ale that is low alcohol and, poundable, if you will. So I chose Triumphant Session IPA from Summit. It's part of their spring seasonal pack. So the thing with a Session IPA, it's like you drink it, it gives you the hop character, the hop aroma, it gives you bitterness, but then it's just lacking. It's just kind of a shell of what an IPA should be. It doesn't quite live up to the name IPA. So it's like a facade of an IPA, a fake IPA, if you will. Doesn't have to be good, just has to look good.
I'm having a hard time imagining what that would taste like. But go ahead. Sample.
Very bitter and light.
Okay, so in other words, I don't like this one.
You would not like this at all.
Okay. So for this moment, I'm glad I'm not there.
Yes.
Cheers anyway.
Jason continued to explore all the elements of the set, while Leah did her best to not look as uncomfortable as she was beginning to feel. She paced quietly on the stage, watching him as he examined some of the minor props, taking a long moment to look at the faux grandfather clock against one wall. At one point, Leah was so caught up in watching him that she nearly stepped off the front edge of the stage. "What's sort of interesting about Arsenic and Old Lace," she said as she stepped back from nearly tumbling into the first row, "is that it started out as a drama and was later turned into a comedy. Same story, same setup, but all it took were a few alterations to make it into a farce." "Comedy's funny that way," Jason said, for some reason now closely examining the construction of the mantelpiece over the fireplace. Jason looked out at the empty rows of seats in the house, and then once more took in the set around them. "So what's the theme?" "Theme? What facet of the human condition does this play explore?" This question brought Leah up short, and so she took a moment to consider it. "Well, there's a lot of death in the play," she finally said. "It's not exactly Hamlet, but there are a couple bodies on stage before the final curtain." "The critics love that," Jason said. Leah couldn't tell if he was being sarcastic or insightful. "Well, some critics do," she said. "I wish the same could be said of our local reviewer." "A harsh critique?" "Brutal. The headline was something like, 'Arsenic is dead on arrival.' It was all downhill from there," Leah said. "A hatchet job?" "Yes, quite literally, as it turns out. The critic's name is Ronald Hatchet. Just our luck. And I thought the critics in New York could be harsh. They have nothing on Ronald Hatchet. Which is a shame," she said, "because the cast is great, and they're funny and committed, and the audience loves the show." "Ah, yes, the final arbiter, the dreaded general public," Jason said as he moved upstage to check out the doors, first the one to the cellar, and then the one to the offstage kitchen. "Well, we're looking at several candidates, so unless you have any other questions for me," she said, letting her words trail off. He pulled back the curtains, looked out the window, and then absently opened the window seat. "Yes, well," Leah said as she glanced at the non-existent watch on her wrist. "Anyway." "One quick question," Jason said. Leah turned back. He was standing over the open window seat, holding the lid with one hand. "Who constructs your props? This is fantastic." Leah moved toward him, completely unsure of what he was talking about. "We built one of these when we did Joe Orton's Loot back in prep school," he continued, "because of course you have to use a dummy for that show. But it didn't have near the detail of this one. which was, I think, Orton's point, as I remember. Whatever was in the wooden box, it was by far the most impressive thing Jason had seen since coming into the building. Leah crossed the stage and looked into the window seat. What she saw in the box was so out of context to what she had expected, it took her several long seconds to understand what she was looking at. And when she finally did, she couldn't help but let out a yelp. The sound was so sudden and sharp it startled Jason, who let go of the box's lid, letting it slam shut. He looked at Leah, who had gone white. With a trembling hand, Leah reached down and clasped the edge of the lid, slowly reopening the window seat. She was hoping against hope that what she thought she had seen had been some sort of optical illusion, but it hadn't been. Leah looked into the box for a long moment as she felt her mouth go dry. "It's the critic, Ronald Hatchett," she said, her voice coming out in a rasp. "And he's dead!"
So, John, as an author myself, I love this scene because I didn't see the end coming. Now, maybe it was late at night, maybe I should have, I don't know. But once the end happened, I saw immediately you had given me all the clues. And every author needs to be able to do this. Like, even in my writing, I write about time travel to medieval Scotland, but the reader still has to have the clues, even in, fluff romance. But I think it's especially true in mysteries. And I want to know, because I don't think I could do this. Does this come naturally to you, this dropping of the clues? Or have you done a lot of reading or studying on the craft of mysteries? Do you have to work hard at it?
I do. I don't have a mystery mind. I don't have a puzzle mind. I come from a family of people with puzzle minds. My brother is a nationally ranked Scrabble player.
Wow.
Yeah, but I don't have that. So it is... It doesn't come easy, particularly hard in the Eli Marks books. For the Como Lake Players books, which take place in St. Paul at a small theater, my goal was to not labor over it so much. So I knew, jumping into that book, I knew who was murdered, I knew how they were murdered, I knew when they were murdered, where the body showed up. I knew nothing else going in, and just started writing. And by about chapter 3, I went, "Oh, I know who it is," I think. And just kept writing, and it turned out I was right. And with a novel, you can take a lot of little tangents, and a lot of those tangents end up being either clues or red herrings. And so you have to pay them off at some point or another later in the story. But because I was literally making it up as I went along, I had no idea how any of them were going to pay off. And it was sort of an experiment to just not be as buttoned down in the preparation of a book and see what happens and just keep it a lot lighter.
I think that can be really interesting, though, and maybe make it more real for the reader, if that makes sense, because I'm working on a book now where there's a ghost in the castle, and I went into it not knowing who it was. And in fact, when I finished my series, I didn't know until I wrote the last page who's going to end up back in medieval Scotland and who's going to stay. And hopefully, that came across to the reader. I mean, if the author didn't know.
Exactly. Yeah. If the author doesn't know, how can you possibly hint or give it away? There's a whole school of thought on that for some mystery writers, where they firmly believe if they don't know, the reader will never figure it out. I don't think that's necessarily true, but it can be helpful in the writing.
I think it can be, and I think it depends on skill too. But did you ever go on the murder mystery train? I think it was called the Zephyr when that was still running.
Yes, and I've been to some mystery theater dinners as well. My wife was an actress in one for a while.
Okay.
And I find those very unsatisfying.
Do you really? Why?
Well, the ones I've been to, the audience votes on who the killer is. And then each actor has their own story as to why they did it. And it's sort of like the movie Clue. There's so many different possible answers, and none of them really make sense. And I prefer a much cleaner through line where you go back and you go, "Oh, you did tell me that," or "You did tell me that," or "You did tell me that."
See, I found the murder mystery play on the Zephyr interesting, and like the movie Clue, because they set it up such that it could be anyone. And on the other hand, I get what you're saying, because as the audience, you're going, well, that's not fair. How could I possibly have known if all of them could have worked? So from our listener... Yeah.
This was read from a recording. How did these recordings come about?
Well, again, we have Jim Cunningham to thank for that. I wish he were here. Oh, there he is. Hey, Jim.
Jim?
I was well into the Eli Mark series, and Jim and I were driving to Iowa for a corporate event, and he said, it's really easy to make audiobooks now. We should make audiobooks out of the Eli Mark's books. And with a little setup, that's what we did. And we did all 6 of the books and the 2 short stories. And then I said to Jim, I have this new series that will have 2 books right away and then a 3rd later on. But it's a female character. And Jim immediately said, can't do it. It's not going to work. I would not recommend having a male do that. And based on his experience and wisdom, I said, fine. And I did some searching around and found a wonderful actress down south named Margaret Mickelson, who immediately understood, because she's an actress, the nature of the story and how to read a main character who is an actor. And so we've never met. We've never even spoken, I don't think. We've only emailed back and forth, and she sends me the files, and I edit them up. But in the case of Jim, every one of the books we've done, he comes to my house, we have a nice lunch. We are down to my very rough audio studio, which is in the garage between some very heavy blankets. He just goes into this little tent that I've made, a little fort, and I put on headphones, and we spent a couple hours just laughing and recording. I have gotten in the habit of trying to put things in the book that make it hard for him. Which is sort of mean. For example, in the 4th book in the series called The Linking Rings, it takes place in London at the Magic Circle, which is an international magic club. And there are lots of different foreign accents in there. The first one, I believe, was from Finland, but he died quite quickly. And at a certain point in the recording, I have this recording still of Jim trying to get through an accent and yelling, "Would you kill him already?"
That's great.
Yeah.
So you two do something really cool together. I think it's only been running a few years. It's called Sunday Night Magic. And tell our audience about it.
Jim, go ahead and give us the background on that.
So Sunday Night Magic is, in a lot of ways, John and myself, it's a project that allows us to see great magic. And that's all it is, for us anyway. And then we invite an audience to experience that magic as well. So we have a partner who is a phenomenal world-class magician named Suzanne, and she's local here in Minnesota with us. So the 3 of us, once a month, take over Theater in the Round, which is in Minneapolis on 7 Corners. And we do a 90-minute, no intermission magic show. And it usually contains 3 different performers. Sometimes Suzanne does a piece of her castle act or a trick that she learned based on one of the lectures that Sunday Night Magic produces. And we bring in one magician from around the country, fly that person in, put that person up, buy that person some meals, and they're part of the Sunday Night Magic show. And so we have obviously, like every other venue in the world right now, we have been in COVID quarantine, so we haven't had a show. We would normally be in the middle of our spring season right now, and we hope to be back in the fall. In fact, COVID has disappeared magically, as some in the government are suggesting will happen.
I have been so impressed. I've been to Sunday Night Magic, I want to say about 3 times, and I've been so impressed with the level of performers.
Yeah.
It was really cool. One night I went there, and what is it called? Flight Time, the younger or beginning magicians. One of them was my son's former boss, or former manager, and they had told me he did magic, and all of a sudden there he was, and he was so good. I was really amazed. But you've had people from London, I believe, and just, I mean, world-class performers. It's truly amazing what you're doing with that. And
we know how good they are when Jim announces the next month's name at a meeting at the event, and you can hear the magicians in the crowd. You can hear all their jaws drop when they hear the name of the next month's person, because they may not be household names, but they are internationally known.
They're household names to magicians, though.
Absolutely, yep.
I mean, short of, I'm blanking on the world famous David. It was supposed to be in Las Vegas this year. Who's the one in Las Vegas that you guys were supposed to... Yes, I can't believe I blanked on that name. You guys were supposed to be seeing his collection right about this time, and that got canceled. But short of him, I mean, you have had like the top of the top. How do you manage that? Do you just have the right connections?
It's all Suzanne.
Yeah, it really is.
She knows everybody.
Tell them just a little bit about Suzanne and the show she's been on. Penn and Teller.
She was on Penn and Teller's Fool Us on the CW, available online on YouTube if you want to see it, in which magicians come on and ostensibly try to fool Penn and Teller. That's not necessarily what they're trying to do, but in her case, she did. She did a routine that she has done for years that absolutely floored them, and she won the Fool Us Award, and got the pleasure of having Teller come on stage afterwards and shake her hand, pick up her prop and look at it, and his jaw drop when he realized he really did not get how she had done it.
And I actually did watch that video clip. I mean, I was just, when a friend started taking me to Sunday Night Magic, like I said, I was just totally blown away by the world-class level there. And I watched that clip of Suzanne doing that, and it's such a simple trick. And she tells this beautiful story about being a mother, which is kind of unique because most magicians are men, and she's telling this story about, putting a Band-Aid and then the heart transfers. It was a really neat, just the story and the trick. So I think that we are ready for beer 3.
Okay. For this one, the Greyhound of the Baskervilles, this is a tale told from the viewpoint of a dog. So I was looking for a dog beer. This one, the style of the beer has nothing to do with the pairing. It's all about the name of the beer and the background of the beer. So this is Ellie's Brown Ale from Avery Brewing in Boulder, Colorado. This is a beer named after the owner's dog, Ellie. So it's just that simple. It's a beer named after a dog. So you would like this one, Laura. This is the malty one of the day.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll have to look this one up, and I have one from last month I still need to look up and try too that you promised me I'm going to love, and it sounded good. All right, so reading number 3, Greyhound of the Baskervilles.
Mr. Sherlock Holmes, who was usually very late in the morning, save upon those not infrequent occasions when he was up all night, was seated at the breakfast table. I lay upon the hearth-rug and aimlessly champed on the stick which a visitor had left behind the night before. It was a fine, thick piece of wood, bulbous-headed, and it exhibited a fine, earthy flavour. I am not often afforded the opportunity to gnaw on objects of any kind, as it is usually frowned upon here in 221B Baker Street, so I was truly enjoying this rare moment of woody pleasure. As I chomped, I noticed just under the head of the stick was a broad silver band nearly an inch across. To James Mortimer, M.R.C.S., from his friends of the C.C.H., was engraved upon it, along with the date, 1884. Well, what do you make of it? Holmes was sitting with his back to me, and to the best of my knowledge I had given him no sign of my occupation. How the devil did he know what I was doing? I thought, dropping the cane at once and affecting an air of innocence I was convinced I wasn't actually pulling off. Then I heard the voice of Dr. Watson next to me. "I believe you have eyes in the back of your head," he said. Ah, I thought, Watson must have been looking at the stick as well. Perhaps, but I also have a well-polished silver-plated coffee-pot in front of me, said Holmes. But tell me, Watson, what do you make of our visitor's stick? You mean the one your hound has been so ardently biting upon? Asked Watson. On the contrary, Septimus has been carefully probing the item to better determine its provenance. Yes, well, to my untrained eye, he appears to be chewing on it. There is, Watson, a thin line between mastication and investigation, offered Holmes in my defence. Now, since we have been so unfortunate as to miss our unknown guest and have no notion of his errand, this accidental souvenir becomes of importance. Let me hear you reconstruct the man by an examination of it. Watson bent down to pick up my new-found treasure, which I allowed him to do without the slightest of growls. That sort of thing in the Greyhound breed is just not done. We may be athletes, but we are also gentlemen to a man. We are known for our pleasant, warm natures, and I felt this was not the moment to tarnish that well-won reputation. I think, said Watson in what I took to be an imitation of the methods of my companion, that Dr. Mortimer is a successful, elderly medical man, well esteemed, since those who know him give him this mark of their appreciation. Good, said Holmes. Excellent. I wasn't in strict agreement with Watson's assessment, but I let the good doctor continue as I realized that no one had, in point of fact, requested my opinion on this matter. I think, continued Watson, that there is also the probability of his being a country practitioner who does a great deal of his visiting on foot. Why so? Asked Holmes, which was surprising, as it was the very question which had occurred to me. He gave me a quick glance and a smile, suggesting we were, once again, both on the same deductive track. Because this stick, though originally a very handsome one, has been so knocked about that I can hardly imagine a town practitioner carrying it. The thick iron ferrule is worn down, so it is evident that he has done a great amount of walking with it. I was pleased to note that he made no mention of the one or two small gouges I had inadvertently made to the cane during my brief perusal of the object.
So that was fantastic, John. I take it you're a Sherlock Holmes fan?
You know, I'm not a huge fan. I love the BBC series, and I've read some of the short stories. This is one of those rare instances where you wake up in the middle of the night and an idea comes to you and you go, well, that's not going to work. And my wife and I have owned Greyhounds for years. We adopt former racers. And I woke up and the phrase, the Greyhound of the Baskervilles, jumped into my head. I said, oh, that's funny. That's a funny idea. I wonder if I could take the Hound of the Baskervilles and rewrite it from a dog's point of view. And I literally sat down the next morning, downloaded it because it's in the public domain, looked at the first sentence and went, oh, that'll work. Okay. And just started to go through it. And because of Holmes's relationship with Watson, it isn't that difficult to shift everything from Watson's point of view to the dog's point of view. Except in this case, the dog knows a little bit more than Watson. And so it is literally, it is. I mean, the book is credited Arthur Conan Doyle with some new bits by John Gaspard, because it is literally his dialogue with some minor variations. I've trimmed out some stuff because it's a little bit longish. And there were 3 or maybe 4 chapters that were letters by Watson to Holmes that didn't work because obviously the dog can't write a letter. So those had to be heavily rewritten. But it is exactly his story. It just shifts the point of view, and the final confrontation with the actual Hound of the Baskervilles is slightly altered because I now have another dog in there as well.
So I actually went online and did some research. Sherlock Holmes never actually owned a dog. He borrowed a bloodhound named Toby.
Yep, Toby.
So do you think it'll upset Sherlock Holmes fans at all for him to suddenly have a dog, or how do you think that's going to work for readers?
It depends on the reader. As in any subculture, no matter what you do, you're going to tick off some people.
That's true.
I did get an angry, very strong word, a tersely worded email from someone who enjoyed the book but wanted me to know that kibble was not available in England. And also that there's no such thing as a chipmunk in London. 2 things I didn't know and actually don't really care about. It was a much bigger issue for me with the Eli Marks books to get the magic right than it was to get their Sherlock Holmes right. And I have gotten emails and personal comments from magicians saying that they appreciate the degree to which I try to be accurate in the presentation of magic. In fact, I actually got an email from Teller himself of Penn and Teller fame, who had read one of the books, the Linking Rings, and wrote and said he was very, very pleased with the way magic was presented in that book, and that he did not guess the killer. So I guess I have fooled, if not Penn and Teller, at least Teller.
At least one of them. But I think that's a great point, because magic is, I think, in a way like music and fiction, there are really not a whole lot of books about musicians. And so that's one of the things my readers like, is stepping into this world of orchestral music and the backstage. All these silly little details that you would never know. Like, I'll never forget the time that I was playing. These are all adults, like in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 70s, whatever. And we take a break from practicing the piece, and all the strings go to one side, all the trombones congregate over here, the trumpets and French horns gather together. And two of us looked at each other, we're like, we're adults, and we're still congregating by instrument. It's one of those funny little details. And to magicians, I bet it's the same. They never read about their world. I mean, do you know of any other author that's writing books set in this world of professional magic?
There are some older pieces. I'm not sure anybody's doing it currently. But yeah, they are very happy that it's presented accurately. Although I did early on when the first book was being shopped around, there was a publisher who was interested in it, and she wrote and said, I'd love it, except at the end, Eli doesn't save himself using his magical powers. And I don't want to give away the ending, but Eli uses everything in his pockets as a magician to save himself and someone else at the end. He uses all of his magical powers. But she thought, no, it's like Harry Potter. He should have a magic wand and be able to make stuff happen. And I think magicians hate that sort of thinking, that they can't do anything. Therefore, they can't do everything.
Mm-hmm. And you would think that, people wouldn't make that mistake, that they would know this is illusion.
People, God love them, it takes all kinds.
Jim, you have done a lot of work in voiceovers, and I'm curious, John was talking earlier about the accents. What sort of preparation goes into this sort of work? Because I know you don't just sit down and start reading.
Well, funny you should put it that way, because largely that's what happens. In recording a book, sometimes I don't have the luxury. So I've done John's series, and then I did another series of books about a post-apocalyptic world where a virus is released, strangely. And
that's funny.
Everybody dies except for people that were naturally immune to it. And so I did that series, and then I did a nonfiction book too, about an Indian mystic, a Swami, a true story. And sometimes I will get caught up in a book enough to need to read ahead and finish it. But let's just take the Eli. Having never read the material that we're recording, and so I make sense of it as I go along. And sometimes after I read something, I stop and say, "Okay, I get it now. I get where we're going here. So let me just back up and re-record that." And so I think John will say in most instances that I'm self-editing in that. If I know if I got something, and I know if I didn't get something, and if I didn't get it, I'll stop and say, let me do that again. So I don't I don't have the luxury all the time of reading ahead and knowing what it is we're going for or trying to get. But as I read something, I know if I've made correct sense of it or not. And then if I didn't, we stop and I do it again until I'm happy.
And if I can just add, it's a rare gift that he has, and it comes from 25, 30 years of being a professional voice talent, walking into a booth, being handed a page full of copy, client sitting across the glass from you, glancing at it and reading it and generally getting exactly what they wanted right then and there. The average reader can't do what he does.
Right, and you spoke to exactly what I was going to ask. Could you have done that when you were starting this, or is this a skill that you've developed over years of doing it?
Boy, that's a good question. I would imagine that, yes, indeed, that there was maybe some glimmer of understanding how to do it. Even as a young actor, I probably could have gotten into the ballpark. But as I have, I guess, the experience that I have comes to bear in these situations, and because I've done it for a while, I can cold read things pretty accurately. And often, as an actor, if you go into an audition situation, they may ask you to do a monologue that you have prepared, but oftentimes if they like that monologue, they'll just hand you the script and say, okay, yeah, good. That's great. Here's the script. Just go ahead and do something, read this page with me from the script. And, sometimes you get a chance to look at it and sometimes you don't. So having that sort of club in your bag to be able to be a cold reader and kind of make sense of things is a good club to get.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting listening to it, because still on my mental list of things to do is to get my books narrated, and I've been putting it off because it's a huge job. We are getting close to having to wrap up. John, I just want to read some comments to you from one of your readers. And this is Bob Miller, but I think he probably does speak for any magician who reads your book. He says, as a magician and a writer who has listened to all your books, I really appreciate the conversations between the magicians, which demonstrate your knowledge of things that are important to magicians, the ownership of magical creations and techniques. And it's been really interesting hearing about that as, a civilian, so to speak. The pack's small, plays big quality of a show, the description of the routines in a show and why they are important, like your description of the floating light bulb, the rich history of magic and magical societies. It opens the world of magic up to the non-magicians and demonstrates the great artistry which is often unknown or obscured by modern-day amateur magicians. So, thank you. And unfortunately, we're running out of time for, any comments on that. But I want to say, as a reader, like I said about my books being set in this orchestral world, I agree with him. This is part of reading, is to learn about these worlds that we're never going to know of if we just have to live our own life to learn. So I look forward to reading more of your work. Thank you. At this point, we need to wrap up. And so that means, do you two have any links that you would like people to go to?
People can always just go to EliMarksMysteries.com. That's Eli Marks, M-A-R-K-S, Mysteries.com, to see all the books. And then there's a couple free things there they can click on as well if you want to read some free short stories.
Okay. Michael, what are your links?
I am at aperfectpint.net on the web, and aperfectpint on all the socials except Twitter. We are at Book and Brews on Instagram, and Books and Brews with Laura Vosica and Michael Agnew on Facebook. Jim, where can they find you?
They really can't. I'm an acquired taste, and you have to know how to find me. You can find me on Facebook, but I have no. I have an agent that gets me my work, or a friend like John who hires me. So if I have no real formal website or presence.
Okay. So I can be found at bluebellschronicles.com, bluebellstrilogy.com, lauravosica.com. You'll end up at the same site for all of them. I'm on Facebook, laura.vosica.author. I'm on Twitter, Laura Vosica, and I'm on Instagram, guess what, Laura Vosica. I think there's an underscore. But I never post anything, so it doesn't matter anyway. How about upcoming events? Michael? Surprise me this time.
No public.
My only upcoming event is I do have another presentation of Scotland in the Eyes of the Author. I have yet to hear. It's scheduled for July, so I don't know if it'll be in person. If it's online, then presumably anyone can join. And my publisher, Gabriel Sworn, is accepting submissions for poetry for Startled by Nature, and those are due July 15th. So, John, any upcoming events?
No live events, but
Surprise.
The Eli Marks box set, books 1 through 3, is now available on Amazon and Audible.com if you want to listen to all 3 books. The second box set will be available very soon. That's books 4, 5, and 6. Acting Can Be Murder is out on Audible. The new book in that series, Dying to Audition, will be out soon. Jim recorded stuff for one of the filmmaking books, Fast, Cheap, and Written That Way. That'll be out soon. So lots of audio books coming out over the summer.
Fantastic. And Jim, do you have any upcoming events?
Nope, I don't. Everything that I do is on hold right now. There's no sports, there's no theater, there's no live events. I've got a virtual event for a corporation next week, but only corporate members can log in. So,
yeah.
Well, thank you, both of you, for being here. It has been an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to reading your books and hopefully being at Feast of Fantasy sometime again.
I'll be there.
Who do we have next week?
Great. Okay, goodbye.
Who do we have next week, Laura?
Who do we have next week? You know what? For some reason, I didn't print off the last page where I write my notes, and I do have severe short-term memory issues, I guess. Mark Connor is going to be here next month, and he is as unique as Books and Brews. He is a boxer and a poet. So he runs the site, I believe it's called boxersandwritersmagazine.com, and he runs, I think he owns his own studio where he does personal training. He is a sparring partner. He teaches fighting, and then he writes poetry. So a very unique combination, and I am really looking forward to hearing his work and interviewing him and how that all fits together.
Excellent. So thank you everybody for tuning in. This has been Books and Brews, episode 14. Cheers.
Cheers.